Welcome back to another Procreate tutorial. Today, we are going to learn how to create this beautiful glass disco ball artwork. Let's get started. We're going to start by creating a new canvas by tapping the plus icon right here. And we're going to use a square. The first thing we need to do is decide on a color palette. You can use a monochromatic palette or something with a bunch of fun different colors. I like this Flourish palette that comes with Procreate because it has a lot of fun bright colors, so we're going to use that for today. To start out, we need to grab a monoline brush. You can find one in the calligraphy set in Procreate as well. And choose the base color for your disco ball. Let's create one that has some kind of pink and purple tones in it. And we're going to start off by just drawing a circle. Hold your pencil at the end to get your quick shape and put your finger down to make a perfect circle. Tap up here where it says circle and you'll be able to move this. I want to go ahead and get this in the exact center of my canvas, so I'm going to tap on the transform tool. Make sure snapping is turned on. And now I can make sure I have both of these gold lines and it's perfectly centered. I'm going to go ahead and turn snapping off now so it doesn't interfere with the rest of my art. Let's go ahead and fill in our circle. And we're going to add a new layer for our lines. Choose another color. It can be a lot darker or a lot brighter. It just needs to have enough contrast to where you can see it. I'm going to make my brush a bit thinner here. That's a pretty good amount. Now we're just going to draw some crisscross lines all over our circle. Draw your line and hold it at the end. Tap your finger down to get the perfectly straight line. These don't need to be perfectly placed. You're just going to get an approximation here. They can be a little bit closer together as you get towards the outer edge of your circle. And then we want some going the other way. Now comes the fun part. We're going to come to our transform tool. Change this over to warp. And if you want to, you can also turn on advanced mesh to give you a little bit more control. And then we're just going to start dragging these lines up a little bit. Make sure that you've got plenty of room for these lines outside of your circle. Once you feel like you've got that pretty well covered, we're going to come to the adjustments menu, go down to liquify, and we are going to choose expand. We're going to tap right in the center and just pop those out a little bit. Give it more of that 3D look there. Now we want to trim the lines that are outside of the circle here. We're going to select our circle layer, choose invert, come up to the layer that has our lines, and choose clear. That will trim the lines that are outside of the circle. I want to be able to drop color into all of these different little areas to change it up a little bit. We're going to be able to do that by making this a reference layer. But as you can see, if I isolate this layer, we have some open edges here. So if we drop color, it's going to spill out here. We need to make sure that this edge here is filled in. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this layer so I have it as a backup. We're going to come back to our circle layer, select it again, choose invert, come back to the layer that is visible here, and now we're going to choose fill. What this is going to do is this is going to allow our reference layer to be completely filled in so we don't have any of that color spilling out. And then we still have our backup layer without this edge to top it off later on. This we can just drag to the top and leave it hidden for now. Let's go ahead and make this layer a reference by tapping on it. Let's add a layer underneath that. And now we can play around with some of these colors. You can drop that on there, choose continue fill, and we can add this to some of these other boxes here. And now, as you can see, we can even fill in these ones at the edge because we've got this frame blocking it there. I'm going to do each of my colors on a different layer because I'm going to add some effects to them later. Now I've got all of my squares filled in with different colors here. We can go ahead and hide this layer and bring back our lines. And we're ready to move on to the next step. Since a disco ball is made of a bunch of different pieces of glass, I'd like to add different glass textures to each of my colored layers. In order to do that, we're going to need clipping masks above each layer. I'm going to change the blend mode of these to overlay because that's what's going to work with the brushes I have. If you have different brushes or different textures that you're going to import, this may be different for you. I'll put a link in the description to the brushes that I'm going to use. These are overlay brushes, so I'm going to use a dark gray for this. And I'm just going to pick a different type of glass for each color. And you'll see as I paint this on, it's just going to give a really nice texture to all of those pieces of glass. And I'll repeat this process for each of my colors. Depending on when you watch this, I may have different glass brushes that I'm using, but I will put a link in the description to these ones, as well as in the future, if I add additional options, those will be available as well. Now we've got all of these fun glass textures in here. I want to add a little bit of shadows and highlights to these. This is another reason why it's really helpful to have your glass colors, even if you don't have a texture, to have these on separate layers. We're going to do this with another clipping mask. If you have textures, this can just go underneath. I'm going to grab black by double tapping close to it, and I'm just going to use the soft brush from the Procreate airbrushing set. What I'm going to do is temporarily hide some of these other ones so it's really clear which one I'm working on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come into one of these corners and add some shadow here. And I'm being pretty rough with this because we are going to blur this in a second. And on this edge, I'm going to be a little bit darker because I want the whole edge of this to look pretty dark. You can decide where you think your light is coming from in your piece. Now once I've done it for all of the colors on that layer, I'm going to come to Adjustments, down to Gaussian Blur, and just slide across and blend those shadows in. We can add another layer above this, switch to white, grab just a monoline brush, and just do a few little taps to add some highlights in here. And then we'll go back and blur these as well. So that process will get repeated for all of these panes of glass for these different colors. I'm going to go ahead and take care of that, and we will be right back. Now we've got our shadows and highlights added to all of our layers of glass, and we're going to add a little bit of dimension to these lines. Just for fun, I like to make them glittered. We're going to come up here to the very top where our lines layer is, add a layer above that, and make it a clipping mask. I'm going to use one of the brushes from my glitter set. I'm going to include this brush in a link in the description if you'd like to use it, if you don't already have a glitter brush that you want to use. I'm going to sample this color right here. And then we're going to change this blend mode to add. Now we can see what size this brush is. Right now I'm at about 54%. And we can just start painting over all of these lines. And this is just going to add a really nice, fun touch to our disco ball. The last thing that I want to do to this disco ball is I want to make these lines pop a little bit more, look a little more 3D. We're going to come back to this lines layer, swipe to the left and duplicate it. Come to the bottom version of that. We're going to turn this black and make a little drop shadow out of it. Go to Adjustments, Hue, Saturation, and Brightness, and we're going to take this brightness all the way down. Now we need to just offset this a little bit before we blur it. Come to our Transform tool, and we're just going to tap, make sure you're on uniform, tap a couple times off of this corner, the same direction that whatever you did your shadows. And we can start to see this black line coming out here. That's what we want. Come back to Adjustments and Gaussian Blur, and just slide over a little bit until you get enough 3D dimension here that you'd like to see. That's about 4%. I think that looks good. And now we've got our beautiful sparkly glass disco ball. You could stop here. I'm going to add a few more effects to this if you want to follow along. We're going to add a new background to this. Add a new layer right at the bottom. I'm going to choose a almost black, but in the blue range, so it's like a dark night sky. Let's drop that on there. And then we're going to add a little glow outside of this. Let's take our circle layer, swipe left to duplicate that. And let's take this bottom one, and we are going to turn this white. Come up to Adjustments, Hue, Saturation, and Brightness, and turn that all the way up to max. Now all we need to do is just come to our Gaussian Blur and just slide that over a little bit. Give our disco ball a nice little glow. we are going to add a little bit of sparkle to this as well. Come up to the very top and add one more new layer. Let's switch back over to white. Change this blend mode to add also. And in the luminance set within Procreate, there are some fun brushes we can use for this. We are going to start with this brush that says Stars. And you can play around with the size of these. If you tap once, you'll get one little star like that. And that can be really fun to highlight an area of this, like it's sparkling. You can adjust the size of these. The other thing we can do is add some stars to our night sky. We can put one more layer right above our background down here. Change the blend mode to add. Reduce the size a little bit. And we can add some more little stars back here. And now you have a finished disco ball piece in Procreate. I hope you found that helpful. I love showing you how to combine creativity and technology on this channel. If you enjoyed it, I would really appreciate it if you took just a quick second to give me a thumbs up down below. It really does help out my small channel and just tells YouTube that more people should watch this. If you want to learn some more Procreate tips and tricks, make sure that you watch this video next.